We're rolling.
Okay, so we're ready now. We're ready whenever you are. So you start whenever
Yes,
you want to start.
and for your checking the volume and all that, I
You sound good.
can just apologise for being like this. I looked much worse on Sunday night, didn't I?
Boy.
But anyway, I can't undo it. My experience as a pilot, or before that in the RAF, I've just been saying to you that there's nothing I wanted more in life than to become trained as a pilot in the Air Force. And that seemed to be the experience of practically all the guys, well, if not all of them. And when we were about 10% of the guys were taken off course for not being able to fly very well or couldn't get through ground school, something like that. A common problem for flying was that chaps couldn't correctly judge how far they were off the ground, and when they were landing, they would get down and then bump and come up. And there's a film actually with Richard Attenborough playing the cadet that couldn't do it. I don't know whether you've seen it. It's very good. Journey Together, it's called. Have you seen it? Excellent film. Well, my experience was to be called up in 1943 to the Aircrew Receiving Centre in just off Regent's Park, and that was an experience. Met all sorts of chaps, and I think it was the third day we were there. With all these chaps, we went round to Abbey Lodge, I think it was called, to get all sorts of jabs for all sorts of things, you know, typhus and all these. And it's surprising how many guys passed out while they were waiting to have these jabs. They were all pretty well strong and hearty before going in, but when we were queuing up, they were dropping out like flies. Anyway, I had managed to weather that without doing that business. To Aircrew Receiving Centre, I went to Babbacombe in Devon, and it was lovely. It was a lovely summer that year, and we all enjoyed it very much. And we were introduced by a very short PT man. I've forgotten his name. He was only about so high, but he introduced us to the runs. What do you call them? Cross country, not cross country runs. Anyway,
Marathons.
pardon?
A marathon?
No, it wasn't. Well, it was. They were marathons. Yes, I suppose they were. And there were two. One, which was known as the minor Firkin, was 4 miles, and the major Firkin, the other one, was 7 miles. Well, when we got there, we found it a real job to do the 4 miles, but by the end of the 3-month course, we could do the 7 miles with alacrity. We went on from there to elementary flying training. We had to be able to solo within 12 hours. I did very well. I managed to solo in 3.5 hours. And, you know, chaps don't believe me when I tell them I did that, but it's a fact. I did do my solo in 3.5 hours. From there, after a furlough, we went up to Heaton Park in Manchester, and something I always remember with mixed feelings about, we were all on parade, several flights with corporals in charge, and each one in turn was asked to number his men and tell the officer in charge how many men he got in his flight. Well, we managed to do our numbering all right, but when it came to telling the CO how many we were, this poor man, he couldn't do the multiplication, and he finished up telling the officer, 32 rows of 3, sir. It was 32 actually, not 33. I think we all, there was a bit of a titter went through the ranks, but I think we were very sorry for this guy. Can't all multiply, can we? That was, Heaton Park was known for its rain, and I think it rained practically every day we were there, and eventually we were entrained up to Gourock in Scotland, and boarded the Queen Mary. And of course we were all amazed at what a huge ship it was, and whereas it used to bring back from the States 10,000, in fact I think it still holds the record of carrying the maximum number of people on a ship ever known. I think it was 16,500 and something. And that was, it must have been very crowded. The usual score was about 10,000. Well, when we went over, so far as I know, there were only 600 of us Air Force cadets going across to Canada to be sent to our various places of training. Is this the sort of thing you want to hear from me?
This is absolutely brilliant. So when you got to Canada, so you just take it, keep going and do it from Canada, because then you would have gone, then you went on somewhere else to
Yes.
go after Canada.
This was in 1943, wasn't it?
Yeah, this is in 43, yes. Yes, we landed in New York and were straight away entrained up to Canada, to a place called Moncton, which was the distribution centre. Most of the guys trained in Canada, but there were 6 British flying training schools in the United States, and we were sent, fortunately, when they said, pulled us out and said to go down to the stores and pick up tropical kit, well, we knew we were going to go somewhere nice and warm, and it was Falcon Field in Mesa, Arizona. There were 109 of us in that number sent down to Falcon Field. It took us. We had to change trains rather in Chicago, and it took us in all 5. I think it was 5.5 days to get from Moncton. We went down to Chicago first, and then we were a day there, and that was marked by us meeting one of the actors from Hollywood, the short man. Do you remember his name?
No, I don't know. No.
You met him in Arizona?
No, this was in Chicago.
Oh, in Chicago.
We met this guy. He was in Casablanca. The man, the chap who was caught for stealing. He had a couple of chaps killed to get there.
I can't remember what his name was there.
Is he the one who sang? Humphrey Bogart.
No, he was the star, but he wasn't the guy who was eventually shot. He got shot by the.
Mickey Rooney? Mickey Rooney?
No, it wasn't Mickey Rooney. I'm sorry, I can't remember. I remember he was a very short guy, and he had two very nice looking ladies with him, much taller than him. There they were, and he was down here in the middle. Anyway, we met him, and then we started the long train journey from Chicago down to Mesa. And we had quite nice bunks, and the food was quite good, and we were looked after by train staff on the train, and yeah, it was wonderful. I think we played an awful lot of solo whist going down there, sometimes playing all day and all night. And we got a great welcome when we got to Mesa Station, and that started our time of 6 months in Falcon Field, and we just loved it. It was a great management, a wonderful field, wonderful food. With the first meals we had there, we just couldn't believe that there was going to be all that, anything from cereals to chops or steaks for breakfast. This is, well, that's how it was all the time there.
Coming back to the station, then, I think you were met at the station by women who would become like sort of surrogate mothers to you.
Well, that didn't happen until the Sunday following our arrival there, and that's what did happen. These delightful women came in their cars and offered their hospitality. Not everyone went, but I went to a Mrs. Hetherington, who had a very nice daughter, Margaret, who we've kept in touch with and visited many times over the years. And I regret, my wife and I very much regret, she died a year ago. She would have been 94, I think, when she died. But we had wonderful times with her.
What did she actually do for you?
Well, Mrs. Hetherington took us home and fed us, of course, unless on one occasion she introduced us to Camelback Inn. She took us there. That was the first time we visited Camelback Inn. I don't know whether anybody or many people listening to what I'm saying will have been to Camelback Inn, but it's a wonderful place to be. And over the years we've stayed there. Too expensive now. It's very expensive to be there now. I don't think we could afford to be there now. But it was a great place to be.
Was Mrs. Hetherington, was she part of the Daughters of the, what is that, Daughters of the, not the Revolution?
Daughters of the British Empire.
That's it, yes.
No.
Ah.
No, this was a Marriott concern.
No, I mean Mrs. Hetherington.
Oh, no, she was just a local, and she had had people, chaps stay with her before our course.
They were there when they arrived to meet these airmen, to give them hospitality.
Oh,
and
I see.
Whatever they needed, they were going to provide for them.
Oh, good.
Yes, I was 19 course.
Yeah.
There were one or two chaps who became quite famous. One became the manager of Ford Motor Works in Dagenham, and there was that guy who tested the Concorde. I've forgotten his.
Brian Trubshaw.
Yes, he was one of our cadets.
Was he?
Yes, we were a pretty bright lot, and my instructor Fred Merhar by name. He said that 19 course was a bright course, so we were quite pleased to know that. And our commander in the on the flying side, what was his name? Don Prosser. And he was one of the nicest people you could meet anywhere. Anybody who went to Falcon Field to train would have known Don Prosser very well. After the war, he formed his own company near to San Francisco, teaching people to fly. Yeah.
He was an American.
Yes, he was. Yes, yes. Nearly all our instructors were Americans, and they were a good lot of guys. Something else that I remember is that 6 of us bought an old Dodge car from one of the instructors. We paid him $100 for it, spreading out that $100 between the 6 of us. But although we could all fly always could fly airplanes by that time, there were only 2 of us who could drive a car. Yes, and on top of that, it was against the rules to have a car on the camp, and the only time in my life that I can remember telling a bald-faced lie was when the adjutant called me up, and I was standing in front of his desk, and he said, "Martin, have you got a car on the camp?" And I said, "No, sir." My heart fell down quite a way in my body. I wondered what he was going to say to me next. I mean, that was bad enough, but to have to offer another lie, bald-faced lie, or tell him the truth, either of them was going to be awful. Fortunately, at that moment, somebody came through the door behind the adjutant and started talking to him, and I think he forgot to carry on because he never mentioned it again. I just said, well, I forget what he did say, but it was nothing to do with the car. Yes.
Because you've got photographs of that car filled with your friends, haven't you?
Yes. Yes, and I can't... Sorry.
Why didn't they allow you to have cars?
Why didn't they? I never asked him. I never asked him.
Because if you'd had an accident, of course, it would have been more than unfortunate, wouldn't it?
Yes. Yes, well, I remember the end of that car was that we used it quite a bit. Well, the other chap who could drive and I used it quite a bit. And towards the end of the time, one of the big ends went in the motor, and it got a bit noisy apart from anything else. And we took it into a spare second-hand car place, and the chap gave us $40 for it, which I think was more of a gift because the car was really just about finished. But, seeing us come with our RAF uniforms out there, that was quite unusual, of course, for us to be seen around in America.
So you were generally well received by Americans in Mesa then?
Yes.
What sort of a place was Mesa in those days?
In Mesa, when we were out there, had a population of something over 7,000. And I think it's now about 500,000. And it's beautifully built up. I used to go, when we went into Mesa for an evening, and we were allowed out sometimes, I went to the Green Frog. And they had a bowling alley in this Green Frog, and there used to be a small boy pick up the pins, by hand and put them in place, and he'd have to move out jolly quickly not to be bowled over himself. We used to drink tequila, amongst other things, and I remember being invited out with one or two other chaps to one of the instructors' birthday parties, I think it was, and I remember we drank all this tequila, which was a bit nasty, but we weren't very nice little beasts anyway then.
What was the camp like? You actually lived on the airfield, didn't you?
Yes, it was the billets were in a square, and they were divided into 4 lots into A, B, C, and D flights. I was in C flight, and C and D were on one side of the camp, A and B on the other, and the only time that we would be all together was at meal times or when we went on a church parade. Otherwise you never met them. And you mentioned to me Vernon Duker. I don't remember ever meeting Vernon. I knew the name, but I don't think I ever met him, because when they were flying, we were in ground school and vice versa. So during the days, we just never mixed.
So why do you remember his name? Do you recall, is that from more recent times, his name?
I knew him there because I did know one of my close friends there was Fred Baker. He in Sibby Street, he was a plumber and did very well at it, I believe. And I've written an account of a time I spent with Fred Baker when we went to meet Barney Barnard under Superstition Mountain. Have you seen that? Yes. So I knew Fred very well, but I didn't know Vernon Duker, who would have been perhaps in the same flight as him.
But you'd heard the name.
Oh yes, yes, yes.
And then how did you find the training?
I would say that the training was first class. I only ever have heard one of the guys complain about his trainer, and eventually, because he used to swear at him like anything and tell him that he was acting like he was asleep. That was one of his comments, and he asked to be have a change of instructor, which he did. But they were all good, and there were, as I said, a number of guys who got knocked off the course for different reasons. Either they didn't fly properly, or weren't really good at ground school, or whatever.
So some people were expelled from the course because you were only there for 6 months, weren't you?
Yes. Yeah, well, they were all at different times during the course. They would
weed you out.
Yes.
And you were training on Stearmans and Harvards, weren't you? Then?
Yes. Yes, the Harvard, known as the AT-6, both excellent training aircraft, and still being used. Quite a number.
One of your friends couldn't land.
Yes.
Couldn't land his plane.
That's right. Yes, a lot of the Harvards are still flying all over the world. I think they made over 12,000 of them in all. And would bet that most of them, except those that they were crashed at different times, are still being flown. And the Stearman, we have in Eastbourne, where I live, an annual air display. And some of the display where chaps stand up on the wing are still being flown in Stearmans. And yeah, they still fly very well.
Which was your favourite?
Oh, yeah, we were pleased to get onto the Harvards, the 86s. That was a nice aeroplane. It had a top speed of about 130 miles, I think it was. But we used to cruise at about 100. But the Stearman was much slower than that. But a lovely aeroplane to fly, very safe. And as I say, the instructors were excellent. Well, we got our course 19 graduated in June 1944. We were brought back having been told that most probably we would be flying Typhoons. Typhoons were a single-engine ground attack machine, state of the art. We didn't even see them. Well, I never saw one anyway, never mind about flying.
Just before we go on to what happened when you came back, Dad, one of your favourite stories from Falcon Field, well, you seem to have had quite a lot of time to do the things that you like to do, was climbing Mount Superstition, wasn't it? You ought to talk about that for a few moments.
Yes.
You did
Well,
that with Fred Baker as well, didn't you?
Yes. As I say, I did write
Yeah.
a story about that, but we knew this guy Barney Barnard, you see, through Fred Baker. He got to know Barney Barnard quite well. And Barney Barnard, so far as I know, was the only person who lived anywhere near Superstition. And he lived in the foothills, as it were, of Superstition. He had a ranch there and kept some cattle, which he must have found pretty difficult to round up, but I never saw him do that. And he was quite a good storyteller, was Barney. This is his book. I don't know, have you ever seen that?
Oh, it does look familiar.
Yeah. And I'll just read you a bit about Barney Barnard, towards the end. Yes. It says, on a sunshine day early in 1963, time ran out for Barney Barnard. It was a commodity in which he always had been wealthy. Time to prospect, time to write, time to ranch the purple-hued Superstition Mountains he'd learned to love. Time to fulfill visions and develop his foothills land into stepping stones of progress. Well, he lived up to every word of that. He was a most interesting man, and we enjoyed being with him when we were with him. Yes.
So you went to see him, and then after that you climbed the mountain.
Yeah, well, while we were with him, because we stayed with him, you see. Yes.
So that's the story that you wrote?
Yes.
Ah. So why does it say Jacob? Who's
No,
Jacob?
he didn't write the book. Dad didn't write the book.
Oh, I see.
No, this is, oh no, it wasn't Jacob. Jacob, it does say that. It does say the story of Jacob Waltz.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know.
Well, Jacob Waltz was supposed to have found a gold mine on Mount Superstition.
Oh, I see.
Oh,
So
that's
this-
about right,
And
yes.
to this day, people are still looking
Still
for
looking
that.
for, ah.
Still looking for the gold mine.
I never met Jacob.
No.
I never met Jacob.
So now, if you had to pick one memory from Falcon Field that sticks in your mind, what would it be?
Well, the day that I had to stand before the adjutant was a day that I'll never forget.
When you had to lie?
And I described it perfectly well as a bald-faced lie. And that's much worse than an ordinary lie.
Oh, but that's a good memory to have. Now, how do you think, in life after Falcon Field, what did you take with you from Falcon Field that you were able to use in later life?
Well, one of the things, it was quite a privilege to be in Falcon Field, and with the kind of guy that you were with, because they were all, if I may say, pretty intelligent, and they were mostly well-educated chaps, and they were a pleasure to be with. We also had on our course a number of American cadets. I think there were about 25 of them in all. And they were splendid guys as well, fine chaps. And along with it, of course, all the instructors were nice people. I like the Americans. We've been back there many times, and we've kept our friends, including Mrs. Hetherington and her daughter. But when we came back, as I told you, we never even saw one of these blooming typhoons. In fact, we were trained to fly primarily fighter planes. Well, I never flew those at all. I finished up flying gliders. The situation was that about the same time as we got back from the States, they were having, what was that other big glider operation? Arnhem, which was a disaster. And they lost a lot of their pilots, some taken prisoner, of course, but most of them, I would think, were wounded, if not killed. But they did need to do another operation, and that was in March of 1945 to form a head over the River Rhine. And I was trained on horses to fly and took part in that. That's the Horser. Unfortunately, came out of it alive. I think I'm right in saying that there are about 600 RAF newly trained pilots were seconded to the glider pilot regiment, and I think about 50 were killed in the operation.
This is Operation Varsity, isn't it?
Yes, Operation Varsity. And it took place on March the 24th, 1945. And it wasn't many weeks after that that the war finished.
But that was quite closely fought, that Varsity operation, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. It was the biggest glider operation ever. I think there were 1,300 gliders took part, and with 1,300 tow planes taking part, that meant that there were 2,600 aircraft in the air for quite a long time, going to that. And the problem was, well, one of the problems was that they'd been bombing the daylights out of the local towns to soften up the resistance that we might meet there. And there was so much smoke around that it was very difficult to see the landing zones. And I, for one, I kept my height as much as I could so that I could have plenty of height to play around with if I needed to do anything funny to get down, and that proved to be the case. Well, I was hit a number of times with flak on the way down, but in the final approach, I did have, well, I'd better go back a bit to tell you that my glider, my tow plane pilot was a Canadian, and before we took off, he gave me a packet of sweet Capital cigarettes, which when I was sitting in the glider, I had put behind me, sitting on a compressed air bottle. It was about 18 inches from me, about here. And coming in, some nasty German was shooting with his rifle, I suppose, and a bullet came through there, through the
That's it,
windscreen, and went straight through this packet of sweet Capital cigarettes. I smoked all the fags, but I've still got this packet, which is a memento, just to remind me how the Lord kept me safe at that time. I wasn't a Christian then, but I always knew about the Lord, and I never had any doubts about how he saved me from that bullet.
That's a great story. That's perfect.
And you did, in fact, unlike a lot of pilots, manage to land your horses successfully.
Yes. I don't often have the opportunity to blow my own trumpet, but of all those, there were about 600 horses took part, and only 39 of them landed in a condition where they could have been taken off again. I was one of them. But you see, how can you... I've heard some dreadful accounts of how some of these gliders were directly hit and broken up in the air, and one of them talked about, it's written in one of the accounts, how he could see all these guys. It had the horse would carry 28 or 29 fully armed troops, and this one was obviously full of troops. In my glider, I took a jeep and a 6-pound gun and 9 troops, quite different. But this one, where this chap saw all these bodies falling down after it had been hit, that must have been. You asked, what did I remember very much? He'd remember that. He was following on in a glider behind him. Yes.
Heartbreaking.
Yes. War's terrible, it's tragic, it's awful. And there are still men in the world ready to make another war, aren't they? I mean, these Taliban, we wait to see what happens with the Taliban. But
I always think that one of the extraordinary things about your time at Falcon Field is how much you do relish the memory of it. I mean, you had a wonderful time there, didn't
Yes.
you, really?
yes, everyone would have said that, except the guys that were knocked off course. They weren't very happy. But if you lasted the course and got your wings day was something special. Going back, you asked me what did I remember most? Well, there were a number of things, but of course, it was the day that we were given our wings, our brevets, and that's what we'd lived for years to attain.
Now, did you do any flying after the war?
No, no. The guys that were trained on multi-engine aircraft, like in Canada, they all flew twin-engined airplanes, Oxfords and Ansons, and they would have gone straight on into Bomber Command. That wasn't a very good idea. A lot of, I think there were 55,000 bomber crew lost during the war.
Oh, wow.
That's terrible, isn't it?
It really is.
But they would have been the ones that would have been trained to fly Lancers and Wellingtons.
And what profession did you go into after the war?
Well-
Probably want to wait till he's done with it. 'Cause
Oh,
I can,
okay.
I can pick it up.
Oh, you're picking up. Okay,
Yeah.
we have to wait a minute
Right.
because we can hear the
he's on
speaking.
it. There we go.
Oh, there we go.
Am I
Okay,
speaking all right, Vince?
Absolutely, yeah. Sounds great.
you're good. No, you're good. It's just Jeff was speaking on the
Yeah,
phone,
yeah, right.
so we could hear him speaking on the phone.
Right, okay.
So what profession did you go into after the war?
Well, I had met a rather nice WAF in the camp that I was demobbed at. What was the name of it? Kirk? Oh, never mind. Anyway, she was a very nice young lady, and we got to know each other very well and wanted to be married. So my big desire was to get into a job with some income as quick as I could so that we could get married. And I went to work for my grandfather, who was a wholesale provision merchant in London. And that I didn't stay long, only a couple of years, because I had two cousins there who didn't like me very much.
They were afraid that he might take their inheritance or something.
And I went to work for a company that we were buying. It was a supplier to the company, to our company. And I spent the rest of my life in the food business. Yes, and eventually I formed a company in 1970, which we eventually sold, and we were employing 125 people at that time in 1994, leaving my son Jeffrey as managing director. And now our problem, I don't know whether this is of interest to, yes, our problem was we never had enough money. We kept doing more business. The bank kept on telling us then that we were over trading, and eventually more or less told us that if we didn't sell the company, they'd sell it for us.
Well, there was your answer.
Yeah, yes. But yes, it's looking back. By the time we sold it in 1994, the advantage of having a value, what do you call it?
Quality of life?
Well, anyway, you didn't get any value for the company. Goodwill.
Oh,
There was no
goodwill.
goodwill had finished, and all we really got was not much more than asset value.
Ah.
Uh,
But think of the
I say
experiences.
that, when we met, I was in charge of German and Italian prisoners of war.
Oh.
And he'd say, come along, put somebody else in charge. I want to take you out.
So it worked.
Yeah.
Oh well, good. Well, I think we're good. Was there anything else you wanted to share?
I can't think of anything at the moment.
Well, you also mentioned that, you know, some of the friendships you made at Falcon Field went on, didn't they, Dad? You know,
Yes. Oh, yes.
Fred Baker, you were friendly with him right up to the time he
Yeah,
died.
that's right. And Stan Waller, both of them.
Yes, he just died last week, didn't he? Stan.
Stan Waller.
He just died last week.
Well, it's not the Stan Waller that I.
Stan Jarvis.
No, Stan. No, there was another Stan.
Wally. Is it Wally?
Yes, Stan Wally.
Wally.
He died, did he?
Last week.
I didn't know that.
Yes. Sadly, last week he died.
Ah.
Yes.
Oh,
Hmm.
dear. That's a shame.
Yes.
So
Because
how-
he was one of the people on our list
yeah.
who we were going to go and see. And yes, he died last week.
He nearly died the other day.
Exactly. You
Yes.
nearly did too.
Yes, he was all bashed up.
But yes, no, very, yes.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yes, my uncle was really sad to hear that too.
Mm.
So yes, he was sad to hear that. But yes, so you know, so understandably we won't. His daughter isn't, you know, doesn't feel like talking, so that's perfectly fine. We completely understand. So,
Just
but
an intro, just for his intros, his name, and then what he did during his time, and
okay,
maybe the group that he was in Falcon Field, years or something.
okay. So if you could say state your name, what your position was,
Yeah.
and the group that you attended at Falcon Field, and what year it was.
I was called up in February 1943 and did my ITW at Babbacombe in Devon. My name, incidentally, is Walter Martin. I was known as Wally all my RAF life and my working life, but I'm Walter now, as my family also always call me Walter. Yes. What else can I tell you?
What was your when you joined?
yes.
What were you called? Were you called a cadet, or what were you called?
What was I called?
Yes, when
Well,
you were at Falcon Field.
I graduated as a sergeant and went on to be flight sergeant, and I should have graduated to warrant officer, but by the time that time came round, they didn't give us our rank. They did pay us as WOs, but they didn't give us our rank, which was pretty upsetting.
And then what group were you in at Falcon Field? You know, you were in group 19, weren't you?
Yes.
So if you can just say that and what were you? Were you a cadet?
Yeah. I was on 19 course, and went out as an LAC, leading aircraftman.
And
What
what
else?
did you go in as? For course number 19, what was your position when you went into course 19?
Yeah, LAC.
Oh, that was the
Yeah.
that was the position. Oh,
Yeah.
good. Oh, so we're good.
Yeah.
Okay, so what else have we missed, Vince? Anything?
Oh, I think that's all right.
Are we good?
Yeah.
Okay, I think we're perfect. I think we're good.
So he's quite good, is he?
Yes, uh-huh.